Is this the dagger?
G'day guys, JB here, 14 weeks through the 25-26 NBA season, and with the end of January nigh, with the trade deadline very, very near and the All-Star break upon us, things are starting to get a little more interesting. Of course, those that look like they're going to be genuine contenders continue to sort themselves out from the pack. Those who are certainly not going to be in contention continue to fall away. Ultimately, at the moment, it's not about the basketball, it's the chatter around the players and whether they're going to be in the same spot. There's been some injury concerns, and ultimately it is the trade rumours that are dominating the conversation. But there is a lot more to it, and there is quite a bit happening. So let's get into it. Let's get into my Week 14 review for the 25-26 NBA season. We start with the Atlanta Hawks, who are able to go on an undefeated run this week to try and get back towards 500. 23-25, they are now 10th. And history does say they can go on a bit of a run. Currently, though, they are sitting behind the Chicago Bulls, and that for me is concerning because if you're sitting behind the Chicago Bulls, you don't plan on doing too much too soon. Johnson with a really big week, 3 games played, 23.3 points, 13.8 rebounds, 7.7 assists, 1.7 steals and 0.3 blocks on 4.3 turnovers, 43.1% from the field, 25% from deep and 80% from the free throw line. No shock to say that the improvement defensively of the Atlanta Hawks this week has been a huge contributor and a huge factor as to why their record has been so much better. Is that the be-all and end-all of it? I don't know. There's concerns around trade still happening, particularly for Anthony Davis. I don't see it happening. I think they're going to ride this one out, but I think with a bit of form, they can get themselves back up the ladder. The Boston Celtics, they continue to remain at the top of the ladder, or near enough to the top. Currently sitting second in the East, have managed to make a bit of a break on the Knicks, and now Toronto all of a sudden have really put themselves into that conversation. And a lot of it does come down to the fact, consistently for Boston, that they've had a unit that has been able to deliver a game plan on both ends of the floor. It has been able to do it consistently, and you know it does help when you've honestly had one of the 5 best players in the league in your team at the top of it for the better part of 5 years. Jaylen Brown has taken that mantle this year, and he had another good week. Getting a 3-1 record for the Celtics, 29-17 overall. Brown, 27.5 points, 9 rebounds, 6.5 assists, 2.3 steals and 0.3 blocks on 2.5 turnovers. 44.7 from the field and 64.3 from the stripe, not ideal, and certainly a little left out on the arc as well at 34.8. But Boston just keep finding a way. Brown having the best season of his career and really making a case with the All-NBA first team. The Brooklyn Nets are 20 games below 500, did win a game this week and they're 13th overall in the conference. The one bright spark they may have is I think Michael Porter Jr. should be an all-star. Whether he gets picks, another question, but he really should be an all-star. 17 points, 5.3 rebounds, 3 assists, 0.3 blocks on 1.7 turnovers this week, and no shock when you look at the abysmal shooting percentages there. 36.4 from the field, 28% from deep, and 92.3 from the free throw line, trying to salvage something. The Charlotte Hornets are now 9 games below 500, a big week for them, but they are still not having a big factor moving forward. They have a couple of nice rookies, and again, they're starting to show some real nuance about some of the younger guys. Brandon Miller in particular, injury-riddled last year, interrupted rookie season, really coming across now. 23.8 points, 6.3 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 1.8 steals on 3 turnovers, 55.2 from the field, 43.3 from deep, and 100% from the free throw line. Don't be shocked to see Charlotte move on from LaMelo Ball at some point in the next 18 months. If it's not done this season, I would dare say it's going to be done next year. I know that he's signed an extension, but at the end of the day, Charlotte can't continue to try and hide behind the fact that they've got a guy who plays 50 games, who demands everything to be in their corner, and when everything gets going pretty tough, he just seems to get out of the way. They need to stick with people like Miller. They've got Knipple, who's playing really well. Kalkbrenner's playing really good, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. They've got young guys. They need to utilise them. That's how they're going to make the most of their future. The Chicago Bulls, in the week that they retire Derrick Rose's jersey, hit a game winner and managed to get a 3-1 weekly record under their belt and move themselves to 23-23 overall. They are 9th in the conference. Again, still don't see them doing much more than the playing team unless some teams start to fall aside. I'm not buying into the fact that they need to get healthy. I still think they've got some inconsistencies, and I want to see this sort of stuff over the next 3 weeks heading into the All-Star break to really make some noise, because at the end of the day, Chicago have struggled to put consistent weeks of basketball together for the better part of half a decade. Kobe White with a really good week. And don't be surprised to see him start to play really, really nicely in the back end, knowing that his contract is up. 23.5 points, 3 rebounds, 5.8 assists, 0.5 steals, and 0.3 blocks on 3.8 turnovers. 47.5 from the field and 48.7 from deep to go over 89.5 from the free throw line. Again, until I see something out of Chicago, it's very hard for me to really imagine them anything beyond the play-in tournament. A team that certainly has started to put themselves out of reach of that play-in tournament with a couple of consistent weeks and some big efforts on both sides of the ball has been the Cleveland Cavaliers. Really slow start and certainly underwhelming compared to where many thought they would be, particularly this pundit who had them sitting top 2 in the East. I'm not saying it's not possible now, because they're certainly still an opportunity, but they're going to have to really work overtime and have health fall into their favour. A really nice week this week, 4-0. They're now 28-20, sitting 5th in the East, and Donovan Mitchell with another big week continues to make a case for me for All-NBA first team. He probably ends up All-NBA second team just because of how the seeding is going to work with Cleveland, but he's had another massive year and really should have some respect on the effort that he's put in for the season. This week alone, 34.5 points, 4.3 rebounds, 6.8 assists, 1.3 steals on 4 turnovers, 49% from the field, 38.9 from deep, and 83.9 from the free throw line. No shock that these teams have really good productive defensive weeks and really good leaders offensively when you see results like this. Cleveland, just another example. The Detroit Pistons, 2-1 record, 33-11 overall. They still continue to lead the Eastern Conference and are just going through a patch right now where I think everyone's trying to get their spots, trying to get in and show what they can do, but not overstressing themselves. You know, they're not overworking themselves, and I think that's going to put them in good stead as we move forward towards the All-Star break, and certainly in the back half of the year. You're not relying on Cade Cunningham to just blitz the opposition, and you're not hoping on a miracle defensive game from Asar Thompson to try and get you over the line either. Jalen Duren to me has been an all-star this year, and I think he should get the nod as a backup centre. Nice week from him in the 3 games they played. 18.7 points, 9.3 rebounds, 1.3 assists, 1 steal and 1 block on 1.3 turnovers. He has to be in the conversation around the best one of the members of their best defensive unit, Detroit, and he certainly should be a part of all-star conversations, and I think he needs to be a part of all most improved conversations as well. That's a tough field to crack, but at 65.6 from the field this week and 93.3 from the stripe, he's certainly helped his case. The Indiana Pacers have managed to get themselves off the bottom of the East, but I wouldn't say that's much of an achievement. They're 11-36, they're 25 below 500, a 1-2 weekly record. Siakam, their best player, 26.3 points, 8.3 rebounds, 4.7 assists, 1 block on 1 turnover, 46.8 from the field, 36.4 from deep, 72.2 from the free throw line, and you just have to wonder what this team's going to look like healthy with a returning Tyrese Halliburton in 26-27. The Miami Heat, again, another team with a fantastic record this week with good contributions on the offensive end and locked in defensively. Who'd have thought if you play both sides of the ball and everyone manages to play efficiently, you can break the habit. They've managed to get 3 games above 500 thanks to this week. Again, it's a matter of them getting some consistent time and consistent play under their belt. Orlando is in the same category. Otherwise, yeah, you have to sit there and categorise them with a Chicago. And to be honest with you right now, with the way both teams in Florida are playing, I don't think they're going to be much of a factor beyond a few games in the first round. Bam with a really nice week, though. You can't take that away from him. 26.3 points, 9.8 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 1.5 steals, 1 block on 2 turnovers. 47.3 from the field, 39.3 from deep, and 92.3 from the free throw line. They get consistent bench production. They get consistent defensive production. They have a well-spread offensive unit. That's sitting them up really, really well. They're going to be 50-odd games into the season at the All-Star break. It's going to be interesting to see how their lineup looks and exactly what they can do moving forward with it. The Milwaukee Bucks went 0-2 this week. They're now 18-26. They're 11th in the conference. Giannis expected by his own diagnosis to be out 4 to 6 weeks, and Mark Stein reporting that this man has probably played his last game in Milwaukee. To me, officially, you can say that the Bucks season is done. He's going to be missing for the better part of February. He's going to be missing the end of January. There's no way that he returns in March, and if he does, you know, I can't see it being of any impact, and I wouldn't be surprised with the Bucks to shut him down if he does stay. Giannis for the week, potentially his last week as a Buck, 20.5 points, 13.5 rebounds, 7 assists, 0.5 steals on 3.5 turnovers, 63.2 from the field, didn't take a 3-point shot, 77.3 from the free throw line. I mean, if he does go, there goes one of the 2 greatest players of your franchise ever, one of the 25 greatest players of all time, and a peak run that we've seen in this league that essentially got wiped out because of Nikola Jokic. But one of the most consistent peak runs we've seen in the last 20 years when you look at both sides of the ball. The Knicks, to no one's surprise, managed to get Jalen Brunson back in control of this team, and they managed to actually get some wins on the board. 2-0 record, 27-18, but they have dipped down to the 4th seed, and much like most of the media, everyone has gone into an absolute frizzle because the Knicks, who were expected to be number 1, are currently performing at their general average of subpar or below standard, and are now sitting 4th in the conference. I don't think it's any time to panic. I think they've got plenty of time, but there are a lot of musings around exactly what's going on with the culture and chemistry of the team, and that is a concern. Again, when Jalen Brunson's at the front of this team this year, they are playing spectacularly. Again, a reason you have to have considerations for him towards the All-NBA first team. And again, there's a lot of people who are going to fit that bill, but I think he really has a case. 2 games played, 25.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 5.5 assists on 2 turnovers. Shot 46.3 from the field, 35% from deep, and 66.7 from the free throw line. The Knicks just need to work it out, and they need to work it out quickly. Speaking of teams that need to work it out quick, the Orlando Magic have officially entered the "we are comparable to the Chicago Bulls" talk, and that means they are pedestrian. It means they're just meh, which I really hate to say because I've been really high on Orlando for the last couple of years. I'm the first person to put my hand up and say that. I've really believed in them since the start of Banchero's rookie year. Again, I always refer back to the fact that they're a 5-20 record, and essentially since that point in his rookie year, this Orlando team has been a 500 team at worst, and they've had guys like a Banchero and a Wagner running the show. The issue is we haven't been able to get them on the floor. Other guys are stepping up, but they're certainly not the guys that are going to carry you to that next level, a team that should be looking at a top 4 finished in the East. Banchero this week, 29 points, 7.3 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 0.3 steals on 2.7 turnovers, 55.3 from the field, 46.7 from deep, and 75.7 from the free throw line. Banchero is aware astutely that he is the leader of this team and the responsibility falls with him. He's also aware of what needs to pick up defensively for this Magic side because at the moment they leak shots and they leak points like a faucet without a washer. The Philadelphia 76ers, they are also burgeoning down towards 500, and again, a lot of these teams could potentially just have a 2-week run and all of a sudden they're saved. That's how tight it is for the Eastern Conference at the moment, essentially from 2nd down to, well, yeah, you can argue 7th and 8th, you know, anyone that's 500 or 8 games. I mean, 8 games between 8 spots really isn't that much. I mean, that's a couple of weeks swing both ways when you really look at it. A 1-3 record, though, for Philadelphia, which isn't ideal. They've had, again, some really nice pieces around them. They've had some nice contributions from their star veterans. But it hasn't just been enough, and that certainly hasn't been the case this week. Maxey, in his 4 games played, certainly wasn't the same Maxey that we see from an efficiency standpoint and a high-level production standpoint. Even in the 4 games, 21 points, 2.3 rebounds, 7.5 assists, 2 steals, and half a block on 2.8 turnovers. But again, it comes down to that efficiency. 41.3 from the field when you're as run and gun as he is quite erratic. You factor in 25% from the 3-point line, and there's clearly something amiss. Again, Philadelphia a couple of weeks heading into the All-Star break, but I wouldn't want to be a 500 team. Not when you've got a team like Toronto who have firepower, who have clear defensive intensity, who have flown thoroughly under the radar, but just have guys that chip in, get the job done, and keep going about their business. Another team with a really good week because they converted offensively, they locked in defensively, they've got the pieces around them that are healthy and contributing, they're not relying on one person. They're now 10 games above 500. 4-0 record, 29-19. They have moved to 3rd in the East, and that is not where anyone would have thought Toronto was going to be, and I'm happy to, again, put my hand up and say I didn't think they were going to be there. I thought they could be a playoff team if they persisted. I didn't think we were looking at a potential semi-finalist team. That's the level that they're playing at here in the East. Emmanuel Quickley, there have been trade rumours around him, but whether he's just out there trying to play for a really good contract or a trade, I don't know, but it's been very beneficial for the Raptors. 25.3 points, 6.8 rebounds, 6.8 assists, 2 steals and 1.8 turnovers, and epically efficient splits, leading the way offensively, 61.1 from the field, 61.5 from deep, and 95% from the free throw line. Elite levels of work from Emmanuel Quickley on the offensive end. You couple that with Scotty Barnes, one of the leading contenders for Defensive Player of the Year on the other end, and you've had a really good week if you're a Raptor. Then you have Washington, who are the worst team. At this point, pretty close to the worst team in the NBA. They didn't win a game this week. They're 24 games back from 500. Yeah, Alex Sarr, their best player, 19.5 points, 6 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 1 steal and 1 block on 1 turnover. He shot 50% from the field, 25% from deep, and 85.7 from the free throw line. Over in the Western Conference, there continues to be concern around injuries and health with Dallas. They want to know exactly what's going on with Kyrie. There's a good chance that he's not going to be playing anytime soon. And nothing for what it's worth, but Najee Marshall consistently being your best player with the roster that you've got is really good on his sense of, hey, look, I'm able to step up. But if you're managing this roster, if you're coaching this roster, if you're participating in this roster, that's not the guy that needs to be at number one. But that's the injuries they've got. That's the hand they've been dealt. Dallas 1-1 on the week, 19-27 overall. They're 11th in the conference. Najee Marshall, again, really good week. 25.5 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, 0.5 steals on 3.5 turnovers, 63% from the field, 83.3 from the free throw line, and a third from deep. He's putting up numbers, he's being productive, he's getting involved, but it's just not enough. They're lacking depth, they've got injuries right now. Dallas are just in a no man's land. After you thought they were going to make a run, it's just not going to happen. Season's pretty much over. Meanwhile for Denver, that genuine first up mentality and next person up mentality has worked wonders for them. I mean, we're going on nearly 4 weeks now without Nikola Jokic. And Denver realistically hasn't missed a step as far as where they're at. They're tied second. They are third, but they are realistically tied second in the West. 31-15, third in the conference. Aaron Gordon is back, and he was the one that played in 3 games this week. And some nice production for a guy who's coming off a 6-week injury at one point this year. 15.7 points, 5 rebounds, 4.3 assists, a steal on 0.3 turnovers. Nice efficiency from the field there at 50%. Making a third from 3, I'd like to see that a little bit more, but again, getting back into his rhythm and seeing how many other guys are getting shots, coupled with 72.2 from the free throw line. Denver just keeps finding a way, and you've got to remember, arguably the best player in the world is still yet to enter this team. They've been injured, they've been beaten up, but they're still winning games and they're still sitting where they need to be. This is exactly what Denver needed to do, waiting for Jokic to return. It's a matter of them repaying the favour when he does eventually hit the floor, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. The Golden State are back above 500, as we mentioned. They were 6 games above. They're now back down to 4 games above when you look at how this is all unfolding. 26-22, still 8th in the conference. And who knows what's going on here. Everyone who manages to play Golden State has a conversation about making a trade. There's now conversations about Giannis and the Warriors mixing it up. Steph Curry not playing. Who was shocked that Draymond Green wasn't playing? Coming out this week said he wasn't the dirtiest player in the game. Then proceeded to elbow someone and get ejected. Minnesota really having a go with them. And then on top of that, you've got the Jonathan Kuminga saga where the words used are we need a market, we need a demand for there to be a trade demand. Look, that's fair enough. But if you're not going to use a guy, get rid of him. There's no point holding him back. Moses Moody, he's had a consistent year. He's their best player this week. 12.8 points, 5 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 0.5 steals, and a block on 0.5 turnovers. 48.8 from the field, 41.7 from deep, 50% from the free throw line. No Jimmy Butler now for another 12 to 18 months with a busted ACL. The Warriors get old, and they're not slowing down anytime soon. The Houston Rockets locked in on both sides of the floor. Some big offensive contributions between Kevin Durant and Alfred Sengun. And you have another 3-1 record. Houston taking advantage of the way the rest of the conference is looking. 12 games above 500, 4th in the conference. Hopefully they're able to settle, particularly from a Rockets standpoint. Hopefully they are able to settle heading into the All-Star break. A big week for Durant. 29.8 points, 6.5 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 0.5 steals and a block on 3.5 turnovers. 55.3 from the field, 55.3 from the field, that's 50% from deep. Don't know what my eyes were looking at. And 82.6 from the free throw line. I know exactly where my mind was going now. I mentioned 23. Saw a number today which was running the 4th highest scoring seasons for anyone 37 or older in NBA history. Kevin Durant now sitting second only to Steph Curry in a point per game season over the age of 37 in NBA history. And I mean, that just speaks to the guy's longevity. It also speaks to his dexterity and the ability to score no matter what level he's at, no matter his athleticism. It's full credit, but it really has helped the Rockets this week. Someone alerted me to this fact the other day. The Clippers in their last 18 games have gone 15-3. 15-3, yes, that's right. They were 6-21. Based on that, 15-3, they were 6-21. They're now 3 games off 500. They're 10th in the conference. They've worked themselves into a play-in tournament. Happy to be wrong on this one. I thought they would be a playoff team, but I certainly had them absolutely done as a dog's dinner almost 4 weeks into the season. And I mean, you got to understand, a team was 6-21. That's a pretty big turnaround. I don't care where you're looking at the season. 10th in the conference. They've still got some time to get to 500, and if they can manage some of their injuries, then maybe they can have a little bit more of an impact. I'm not saying they'll win a playoff series, but maybe can have a bit more of an impact on a team that is looking to progress than first thought. James Harden, the best player this week in the 3 games they played. 20.3 points. 6 rebounds, 8 assists, 1 steal on 0.3 blocks, 6 turnovers, the crucial one there, along with the fact that he only made a third of his shots from the field, 40% from deep, 100% from the free throw line. But the Clippers are a little bit back and certainly a little bit better than we first thought they would be. Over to the Lakers, and they managed to make the most of what they could do and had a huge week out of Luka Doncic, one of the biggest weeks that we've seen in the NBA this year. 3-1 record. They're now 11 above 500. They're back up towards 5th. It's going to take a lot of work for them to be able to catch the Spurs and Denver, for the simple fact you've got to expect them to completely slow down with the talent that they have compared to the hot and cold on and off streaks of some of these Lakers players, particularly some of their reserves, and then in turn the inconsistency and the inefficiency that you get out of their leaders. But a big week for Luka. I can't fault it. 37.3 points, 9.8 rebounds and 10 assists per game, 1.5 steals, 0.3 blocks on 3 turnovers, 52.3 from the field, 38.6 from deep and 81.6 from the free throw line. When I talk about Luka putting up numbers, I don't mind that he puts up numbers, but I want him to do it efficiently, and I want him to do it in a way that's going to impact and result in winning games. This is a prime example of Luka doing that this week. The Lakers now 3-1. They're back in the top 6 and certainly making more noise towards that top 4. Meanwhile, the Memphis Grizzlies just continue to, well, just when you thought they were going to do something, they've chosen not to do anything now. A 0-3 week, 18-26 overall, 8 games below. Still talks about Ja, who's basically now said that he doesn't want to be traded. So you've got chemistry issues left, right and centre there. No one's being held accountable. No one's taking accountability on top of that. You've got a couple of young guys that are talented. And a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr. here who's an elite two-way player, who's a very ambidextrous player. But you're not going to go and see him put up Alfred Sengun level numbers. And that's what he's realistically being expected to do right now. There's talk about trading him as well. I don't know what's going to go on in Memphis, but they need to do something fast. They're a week away, again, from their season being over, and calling that at the All-Star break's a lot easier to do than calling it 4 weeks into the season. Jaren Jackson Jr. for the week, 20 points, 8.3 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal and 2 blocks on 2.7 turnovers. He continues to be one of the leading defenders in the league. But they're not winning games, and he's not going to necessarily get acknowledged for that if they're not winning. 44.7 from the field, 23.5 from deep, 87.5 from the free throw line. Minnesota continued to hold out and about. As I said, they've floated around that 4 to 6 region for most of the year. They're a team that seems to time their run. They're back-to-back Western Conference finalists, which is a really crazy thing to think of when you see how they consistently perform up until about the 50th, 55th game of each year. A 1-3 weekly record this week just gone. They're 28-19, so just dropped below that 10-game mark and 6th in the conference. Julius Randle, to me, will be an all-star, whether that's as a reserve, like a genuine reserve or a backup. To me, he should be an all-star, the impact that he's having there in Minnesota. Again, but that's not the talking point. And Edwards just seems to be able to find his way in and out of anyone's pants to have the conversation in his favour. 19.5 points, 5.3 rebounds, 4.3 assists, 1.8 steals and 0.3 blocks on 3.8 turnovers. 45.8 from the field, 25% from deep and 86.4 from the free throw line. Anthony Edwards with some outages and some injuries. We'll see exactly what Minnesota can do. I think they're going to be okay, but when do they time their run this season? The Pelicans went 2-1 this week, but they still remain 24 games below 500 and are dead last in the West. They're pretty much the second worst team still in basketball. Sadiq Bey, their best player this week in his 3 games. 26.7 points, 5.7 rebounds, 3.3 assists, 1.3 steals on 1 turnover. He shot 51.1 from the field, 47.6 from deep, 91.7 from the free throw line. So, 27 on 50, 40, 90 for the week is pretty good. But it'd be nice if he turned up to the game with more than just his clutch bag with his sneakers. The Oklahoma City Thunder managed to lose a game against Indiana, who, again, I think it's for the last 2 to 3 seasons, the only team with a winning record in Oklahoma City, not named Oklahoma, is Indiana. They managed to get a win. And on top of getting that win, Oklahoma City suffered another defeat. They actually had a 1-2 record. They're now 37-10, and unless they go perfect, they will also not eclipse the 95-96 Chicago Bulls, let alone now not being able to eclipse the 2015-16 Warriors, at least in the regular season. They're still first in the conference. I still think they're going to run away with it. They have a concern with the injury of Jalen Williams, but to point out the production that they're getting, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander this week had 37 points, 4.7 rebounds, 7 assists, 1 steal and 1 block on 1.7 turnovers, whilst shooting 70% from the field. He shot 89.7 from the free throw line, 42.9 from deep. There really wasn't much more that you could expect this guy to have done. It's a very Luka similar situation. But there are just some guys that haven't quite been able to step up in these last few games, and that's where the exposure of Oklahoma City potentially comes into it. I still think they're a mile ahead, but there are just some signs that there's ways you can potentially get into the house here. The Phoenix Suns also with a 1-2 weekly record, and they have remained stagnant at about the 7th seed for pretty much all of the year. I'm going to have to go back and see, because I don't think I've ever called a team that isn't a top seed, obviously, more consistently in the spot they're in now than the Phoenix Suns. A 1-2 weekly record, 27-19, so they're 8 games above, and they're 7th in the Western Conference. Grayson Allen, for me, was their best player in their 3 games this week, and a lot of it come down to efficiency. And when you look at the efficiency of some of the players this week, that's a big reason that they weren't getting it done. And it's noticeable when you go and look, they just had shots that wouldn't drop. Again, comes down to being able to lock in on the other side defensively, and I wouldn't have thought this team's the most defensively inclined team. They certainly do have their moments and certainly have their players, but when you look at the inefficiency, there's a reason they went 1-2. Allen, again, their best player this week, and he's a good example of it. 16.7 points, 4.7 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.7 steals, and 1 turnover. Isn't too bad, but when you factor in 39% from the field, 24% from deep, that's not a lot of rocks hitting the ocean when you're standing in the boat. 85.7 from the free throw line. I mean, it's a death taxes operation. Inefficiency costing Phoenix this week. The Blazers with a 1-2 week, they're starting to see a little bit of inconsistency as well, but they are still sitting around that 500 mark. Again, the Chicago Bulls are sitting at 500, and everyone has rode them to the moon. And then on the other side of it, they're the Blazers, who have just potted away to get to 500 to try and crack the market. Haven't had much said. Of course, there seems to be some good dialogue around the conversations and the comments of someone like a Denny Avdia. Okay, that's everyone's prerogative from that standpoint. But when you really want to look at how everything's unfolding for Portland, when you consider the Chauncey Billups stuff at the start of the year, doing pretty well. It's just a matter of other teams potentially catching them if they can get on a bit of a run. Don't know whether that's going to happen. Drew Holiday having a nice week there and contributing efficiently as well. 16.7 points, 2 rebounds, 5.7 assists, 1 steal on 1 turnover. 52.6 in the field and 45% from deep is what they want, but 50% from the free throw line becomes the ultimate concern there for him. Portland just need to be at 500 at the All-Star break, because there will be some other teams I think that start to fall away and potentially give them some easier victories on the road home. The Kings didn't win a game out of the 4 that they played this week, and they now sit 23 games below 500. They're 14th in the West. Malik Monk, their best player this week, 17.5 points, 2 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 0.5 steals, 0.8 blocks on 1.5 turnovers. Shot 54.3% from the field, 50% from deep, and 100% from the free throw line. There's really not much going on here. You had 4 or 5 guys contributing the bare minimum. This Sacramento team is very much folding up the deck chairs. They are packing up the picnic table, and they are heading home to hibernate for the winter. The San Antonio Spurs, a 1-2 weekly record for them, but they are still sitting tied for second. They are outright second head-to-head, I do believe. Third sitting for Denver, but they are still a top 2 team, a team that many thought were going to make the playoffs this year, but certainly not a team that's got a case as the second best team in the West. A lot of that does come down to the big Frenchman in the middle, but there's also been some really steady leadership from this guy on screen here, De'Aaron Fox, who has contributed throughout a bulk of the season. And I mean, I don't have him in as my All-Star. Again, I based my All-Stars around the announcement of the starters. But if you wanted me to pick my All-Stars as we get right to the end of the game before the All-Star break, there's a fair chance that De'Aaron Fox gets mentioned in that conversation, and I think he has to be in that conversation around guys that should be a reserve. This week, 19 points, 3.3 rebounds, 5.7 assists, 0.3 steals, and 0.3 blocks on 2.7 turnovers. 55.6 from the field, 55% from deep, and 60% from the free throw line. Again, a really nice, consistent performer who deserves to get his share of the credit when it's being handed out. And finally, the Utah Jazz have gone in the space of 3 weeks from being right there to not being there at all. 16 games below 500, and they've played 31 of them. 1-2 weekly record, 13th in the conference. Keontae George, their best player this week. 28.3 points, 2 rebounds, 4.3 assists, 2 steals on 0.3 blocks to go with 3 turnovers, 45.2 from the field, 38.5 from deep, and 90.5 from the free throw line. He showed spurts of magic, but you do have to wonder whether anyone's going to be buying a ticket to this show moving forward, because there's a lot of work just to get to even with 62 games to go at game 62, and I certainly don't see the Utah Jazz doing that anytime soon. Whether they make a trade is another question. Whether they sit on it, I don't know. But the Jazz they're not going to do what they looked like they were on the precipice of being able to do only a couple of weeks ago. Anyway, guys, that's been me. That has been my review for Week 14 of the 25-26 NBA season. As you can see, plenty of movers and shakers, some really nice production from some guys, some other so-so performances that are still, leading to wins. And then when you see some of the teams that are going really poorly, when you look at the contributors, when you look at the efficiency, and when you look at the factors, there's no real shock as to why they are where they are. Getting towards the end of the month, so that means that we are going to have an MVP video at some stage in the coming week. That'll be the update for January. And then, of course, at the All-Star break, I will get a bit more of a breakdown for each team in their conference, who I think their key performers have been, and, of course, who I think my leading candidates for each respective team and award is to the halfway mark. Well, the All-Star break of the season. Anyway, guys, that's been me. That's been my review for Week 14 of the 25-26 NBA season. I'm out.